Chapter 28. My hands were shaking, palms damp with clammy moisture. Don't be pathetic, Skylar. I chastised myself as I strode purposefully towards the place Gabriel and I had parted ways. More to distract myself than anything, I tilted my head and inhaled his musky scent. I continued to follow the tantalizing fragrance, changing direction slightly as I approached the woods. So his alpha business was taking place in the village. It seemed that he had disappeared into the forest, and I felt a strange sense of déjà vu as I remembered another time I had followed Gabriel like this, after Riley's funeral. That horrid day seemed like a distant memory, even though it hadn't been terribly long ago. So much had happened since then. However, I still remembered the warm and secure sensation of Gabriel's strong arms wrapped around me in our first hug. Perhaps we would share another embrace today. I tried to envision how this was going to happen, what exactly I was going to say to him. But in my nervousness I just came up empty. I would have to improvise and hope that I didn't make a fool of myself. Truthfully, I didn't know what I was doing. It never confessed my feelings for Will all of those years ago, and they deepened so insignificant compared to what I felt for Gabriel. I just prayed I wouldn't screw anything up and that he wouldn't push me away. I needed him to lower his barriers. Just once, taking another deep breath to catch my mate's scent, I brushed through the thick undergrowth as I entered the edge of the forest. A slightly chilly wind whistled through the trees and caused the hairs on my arms to stand straight up. I was glad it was mid-day despite the presence of the Stone of Jacob to keep the vampires at bay. I was still wary of the darkness of night. The wind shifted direction, causing me to momentarily lose track of Gabriel's scent. Unless he was running, he couldn't be far away. I had followed him minutes after he left. I stopped in a patch of dappled sunlight, turning in a slow circle as I sifted through the scents of the forest. A flock of birds chirped in the trees near me, but I tuned them out, focusing only on my extremely powerful sense of smell. Seconds later, my wolf yipped in excitement as I caught the scent again, this time fresher. I changed direction and continued to follow the enticing smell. I only needed to continue my trek for another minute before I heard a gurgling stream nearby and the scent grew nearly overpowering. For some reason, I found myself slowing down and treading more lightly. It was that I was sneaking up on Gabriel. I just wanted to see what the heck he was doing out in the woods all by himself, and I wouldn't disturb him yet because I was still downwind of him. I only had seconds until the wind shifted again and his powerful senses picked up on my approach. Peering through a splay of thick branches, I spotted him huddled a short distance away. To my surprise, he was in his wolf form, the animal sitting still and silent next to the bubbling water, clothes in a heap nearby. His black as night fur was a stark contrast to the greenery beneath him. My wolf whined, sensing her mate's agitation, and I felt a spike of worry. Mere seconds later, Gabriel seemed to sense my presence because he stood up and turned abruptly as I exited from my shelter of the trees. His wolf's deep and intimidating gaze met mine, but I did not hesitate as I continued my approach. Gabriel tilted his head slightly, clearly confused as to why I had followed him, and his deep voice resounded in my head. "Skylar, do you need something?" I had momentarily forgotten that we could communicate through mind link now. I had never been in front of Gabriel's wolf form in my human state for a prolonged period of time. Seeing the massive beast was even more inspiring when I was fragile and human, and I could not tear my eyes away. I'm very articulate, I thought to myself dryly. Staring at Gabriel now, I realized I was having serious issues putting my thoughts into words, especially when his regal wolf was staring me down. I could still see Gabriel in the animal's eyes, but there was much of his wolf in them, too, and I was as familiar with the creature. My wolf, however, very much liked admiring the muscular thick, glossy fur. "I just wanted to talk to you," I finally said, mind racing to come up with an elegant phrasing. "Is something wrong? I could ask you the same thing. Why did you come out here by yourself? Were you meeting with anyone?" No. I was very grateful he hadn't been meeting anyone like Ava. For example, I pushed the insecurity away. I stared more intently into the wolf's eyes. Underneath the mask, I could detect a whirlwind of emotions and uncertainty. Almost without realizing, I took a step closer until I could touch his soft fur if I wanted to. Gabriel's wolf was so gigantic that we were practically on eye level. Gabriel stared right back, and I could feel the warmth of his breath as he exhaled. If it's a pack issue, I will address it shortly. No, it's about me. The wolf's eyes darkened as I spoke, and I couldn't resist anymore. I reached out a hand, almost tentatively, and brushed it against some of the thickest fur on the side of his neck. He made a growling sound deep in his throat, but I didn't think it was a noise of annoyance. Would you mind shifting back? It's important. I really wanted to tell him now. There was no time to waste. Gabriel observed me for a moment before he huffed a sigh, padding over to the heap of clothes on the ground. I don't know why I was expecting him to take cover to shift back, but he most certainly did not. I attempted to look away before he shifted entirely but did not tear my eyes away in time. I swallowed and almost choked on my spit as a naked Gabriel carelessly threw some short over his lower half. But not before I got a good glimpse of him. My cheeks began to burn and my wolf whined with anticipation. He was built so flawlessly it wasn't even fair. Plus HES more than enough to satisfy us, my coveted wolf said proudly. My cheeks were absolutely on fire, and I coughed into my hand, trying not to linger on all of the images popping up. I couldn't believe she'd just said something like that. Perhaps I was Navi, but I still felt horribly mortified at the inappropriate turn my thoughts had taken. I was trying to have a civil conversation. It's not my fault he showed us all he has to offer. Stop, I commanded her, beyond embarrassed, and I almost felt her smirking. If wolves could even smirk. She was deliberately trying to get me to just jump our mate here and now. He left his torso bare as he approached and my eyes continuously strayed to his ABS and chest as I shifted from foot to foot. Now my thoughts were scrambled and all over the place. What did you want to talk about? Gabriel asked, a wary tone in his voice. I wondered what he was thinking. I was glad he wasn't mind linking me anymore, because my thoughts were much more accessible to him when we were having a mental conversation. Not that Gabriel would pry, but if HED wanted to, HED have a much easier time while we were mind linking. In wolf form my thoughts were even more transparent. Right now, with verbal conversation, I was safe. He wouldn't know how much of a mess I was. Skylar. Had I realized I hadn't spoken? Hi. Hey, well. That's all you could say. Exasperated at how pathetic I was, growing more humiliated by the second. This was not how a future Luna should behave, and Gabriel seemed utterly confused. My face probably looked like a tomato. It'd never done anything like this. So I was thinking. I trailed off, taking a deep breath. On impulse, I decided to just go with it. It was pointless coming up with a clever way to say it, so I just needed to be honest. I was thinking a lot at that burger joint today before you got there, and I was seeing happy couples and their kids, and happy little families, and people in love, and I realized that I want all of that. Maybe not kids yet, but someday. And I thought that I'm not right for you. Gabriel cut me off, and I almost choked again. I stared at him in disbelief. What? His brow furrowed slightly, but his words were acidic and bitter as he spoke. That's what you were going to say. Right. You want happiness, but there's no guarantee with me. You're just as likely to end up miserable. So you don't want to take the chance. My mouth must have been hanging open, and I winced as I felt a pang of hurt that was not mine. Gabriel must have thought I was genuinely rejecting him. I supposed he took my nervousness and embarrassment the wrong way. There was undeniable hurt in his eyes, and it pierced me to the core. Seeing his raw emotion like that, perhaps it's best that you decided now. In returning back to the rest of my pack anyways. He was not looking at me. His jaw clenched tightly. His words escaped from gritted teeth. Just get it over with. Every line of his body was tense, as if he was braced to fight off considerable pain. I felt a surge of frustration. No, his eyes snapped in my face. Incredulity in their depths. Tu es agent extraordinaire, Wildest noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. In not rejecting you. If you would have just let me talk, you would have known that. Your Eno. He trailed off, looking as if he didn't dare believe what I was saying. What I was trying to say is that my wolf will never want anyone as much as she wants you. The potential happiness I can have with you will be unmatched by any other. I know it's a risk, but it's 50-50, which means it could work out. His expression had gone curiously blank as he stared me down. I was sure how to take his expression. It's not just my wolf that wants you. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilda. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I pressed on recklessly. You're rough around the edges. Sure, but I know there's good in you. I've seen true emotion in you sometimes. You push me away a lot, but I think, underneath all of that, you care about me too. I was sure what had possessed me to be so open with him, but I continued. It was now or never. And it was too late to take anything back even if it wanted to. I don't think I could live with not knowing. If I never tried to be with you, it would hurt more to think what could have been. I know the risk. You put the decision on my shoulders after telling me everything. I'm not going into this blindly, but it's my choice. Gabriel's eyes were very dark. His hands clenched at his sides. Skylar, his voice was hoarse. His words a bit jumbled, as if he didn't know what to say. You know what this could do to you. If my mark fades, I know. I know it's at stake. He took a step closer, staring at me intently. Do you? His tone still had that curiously rough edge. I blinked at him. Are you trying to talk me out of this? Gabriel swallowed, the muscles in his throat working. I don't want to see you get hurt. I felt a fresh wave of frustration. Gabriel, for crying out loud. I know what can happen. I've decided that you're worth the risk, and that I want you anyways. You're the only mate I'll ever have. We're meant to at least try. My wolf was voicing her agreement in my mind. It almost looked as if Gabriel was trembling slightly as he moved even closer until he was towering directly above me. I stared up at him defiantly. I know I told you that the decision would rest on your shoulders. Gabriel, I just don't want you making any rash decisions without thinking. I felt a pang of hurt deep within me as I stared up into his unfathomable eyes. Have you changed your mind? My words almost came out as a whisper. I was sure he could feel the hurt that was coursing through me. I suddenly looked down at the ground, unable to bear his ethereal beauty any longer. Is that why you're resisting so much? I thought you wanted me to decide. I thought to be making you happy. I knew I sounded pathetic, but I didn't care at this point. I clenched my fists at my sides, not knowing how I would manage if HED decided I was worth the risk. Does this have anything to do with Ava? I regretted my words instantly, but Cal didn't take them back. No, Gabriel growled irritably. This has nothing to do with her. Skylar, I already told you she was nothing to me. And if I could take it back, I would. I regret every second I spent with her. Then why? He ran a frustrated hand through his hair. In trying to protect you. Don't you see that? In just making sure you've thought this through. You make it sound like a freaking puzzle. I already told you I've made up my mind. I want you as my mate. Gabriel. And that is never, ever going to change. He was suddenly quite still. I wasn't even sure he was breathing. Feeling fed up, I let a frustrated growl escape. Apparently, you were the one that still needed to decide how you feel about me. Let me know when you stop trying to make my decisions for me and actually come to the conclusion that I'm worth the risk too. With those parting words, attempting to fight back frustrated tears, I spun on my heel and walked away from him. I didn't get very far. I felt a warm, strong hand circle around my left wrist, clutching it in a secure grip. An instant later, my body was being tugged backwards and spun around with great force. The move was so sudden I felt like my arm was almost pulled out of its socket, but I could only let out a gasp as Gabriel yanked me back to him. As my body turned back to where I was facing him, a large and demanding hand grabbed my chin and forced it up to where I was gazing into my mate's dark eyes. And then his lips came crashing down on mine. I stood there, momentarily frozen, as a shock of electricity coursed through me and I felt pleasant chills up and down my spine. Gabriel's kiss was hard, demanding, and possessive the kiss of an alpha wolf. My eyes fluttered shut and I felt a rush of heat exploding from where our mouths met, and my wolf howled with joy as she realized what was happening. Realizing I was standing like an idiot, I tried to gather my jumbled thoughts and I kissed him back, moving my lips in synchronization with his. I heard a growl deep in Gabriel's chest, and he angled his head to the side, deepening our embrace. One of his strong arms wrapped around me and pulled me tightly to him, the hand fisting in my dark curls. Every inch of space was eliminated between us, and I felt lust pooling deep within me as I felt the contours of his hard body. His bare torso pressed against me and only intensified the burning sensation I was feeling. I felt like I was floating, the blood roaring in my ears. Gabriel broke the kiss momentarily to come up for air, but a second later his lips found mine again. I dimly realized that his free hand had settled on my hip, while the other remained clutched in my hair. I let out a little gasp when I felt his fingertips brush my bare skin underneath the bottom of my shirt, and Gabriel took this as permission to deepen the kiss further. My whole body tingled as our tongues intermingled. Gabriel's husky scent surrounded me, and I inhaled it every time we came up for air. I'd never been kissed like this before or experienced anything even close to our passionate embrace, and I wanted more of it. I never wanted this to end. Realizing that my hands were hanging uselessly at my sides, I brought them up to wrap around Gabriel's broad torso. I ran my hands down his back, outlining his thick muscles and letting my nails scrape against his skin. He growled again, and I felt his muscles tighten as he forced me backwards. Another gasp of surprise escaped my parted lips as I felt my back press against something hard, the bark of a tree. I was trapped now, but I relished the feel of it, continuing to put every ounce of feeling I had into the kiss. Gabriel withdrew slightly, biting down on my bottom lip, and this time I felt the rumbling growl emanate from my throat as my wolf reveled in the sensation. My lust was continuing to build, and I was practically dizzy from Gabriel's scorching mouth on mine. I wanted to feel more of him, run my hands down the contours of his chest. Bringing my hand around, I pushed Gabriel back slightly so I could slip my hand between us, running it down his upper chest and then down to his abdomen as I explored his chiseled body the same way his tongue was exploring my mouth, letting out a husky rumble. Gabriel's lips left mine briefly as, with one smooth motion, he hoisted me up, using the tree as leverage as he wrapped my legs around his torso. I could care less about how suggestive our position was. I used my legs to draw myself even closer to him. The blood rushed to my cheeks as I felt his arousal pressed against me, and my wolf felt a burst of pride that we could elicit that reaction from him. His mouth departed from mine again, and he began to trail hot kisses down the side of my neck and across my collarbone, leaving me gasping with pleasure. It was similar to how it cheated at me all those nights ago in the hotel, but this time I knew he was not holding back. His mouth roamed back up to the area near my earlobe. My skin felt like it was burning where HED kissed it. "I'm leaving my scent all over you so every wolf knows that you're mine," he growled softly, right next to my ear. His voice came out deep and contorted, and I could discern heavy lust interlaced with his tone, like there was ever any doubt. I replied breathlessly, barely able to force the words out. Gabriel seemed to like what he heard because he kissed down my neck with renewed vigor, his mouth moving down my chest where my neck left exposed skin, causing me to tremble. I felt his tongue replace his lips, and I dug my fingernails into his skin, a noise of pleasure escaping me. I dimly realized that I wanted to return the favor, my wolf wanting to stake her own claim on our mate. I used one hand to find his chin, jerking his head up towards me so I would have access to his neck. Gabriel obliged without complaint, and I stretched upwards to press my mouth against the warm skin on the side of his neck. I had never done anything like this before. I knew I was incredibly naive and inexperienced, but touching my mate like this came naturally. I relished the sound that escaped Gabriel's throat as my mouth continued to move across his skin, feeling a rush of bravery. I opened my mouth and bit gently at the area that I planned on marking when we completed the mating ritual. Gabriel groaned with pleasure. "You're going to be the death of me, Skylar." I smiled against him, continuing to move my mouth lower until I was placing gentle kisses and bites across his chest. "Come with me back to the Black Mountains pack," he said suddenly, causing me to pause and look up at him. His eyes were burning brighter than I'd ever seen them, desire evident in their depths, and in a certain part of his anatomy pressed against me. "I want you there with me. Please." His voice held such vivid emotion, his gaze pleading. I'd never seen such an easily read expression from him before, and I relished the way he was opening up to me. I nodded, smiling slightly. "So does this mean you're trusting me with the decision to accept you?" I asked quietly, unwinding my legs from around his torso and allowing him to move away slightly so that I was standing on the ground again. His eyes closed briefly as if he was trying to control himself. "It scares me what might happen to you, but I've made enough decisions for you. As much as I want to protect you, you're my mate, and I know I need to trust you with this." I smiled again, my heart soaring. In this brief, passion-filled moment, it seemed like everything was going to be okay. "I'm glad," I told him softly, reaching up to press my mouth against his neck again, unable to help myself. Like him, I felt the urge to let everyone know he was mine, and my wolf urged me to continue kissing him. She wanted us to return to our former position. It was hard, holding her back, but I didn't want to press Gabriel too hard. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Judging by the look on his face as I trailed my mouth across his collarbone, he didn't mind. "Skylar, I think we need to stop now," he said hoarsely. I blinked up at him, puzzled. My desire-riddled body did not want to stop. My wolf wanted me to mark him this very moment. "I can't hold my wolf back much longer," Gabriel added. I saw the darkness in his eyes that indicated his wolf was close to the surface. "Then don't," I replied before I could help myself. His eyes widened a fraction. "As much as I want to push you on the ground and mark you right here, judging by his expression, he would very much enjoy doing just that." As he spoke so blatantly, I felt yet another wave of desire and warmth building up in the more intimate parts of me. I bit my lip, fighting back the imagery. "I would think you'd want it to be, well, not in the middle of the woods where anybody could find us and interrupt." My wolf sulked, and I was sure my face held a disappointed expression, but I knew he was probably right. That type of intimacy deserved some sort of romance, especially since I had never experienced it before. "I guess you're right," I said reluctantly, although my hand was trailing across his chest and down his stomach again. I couldn't help but touch perfection when it was displayed right in front of me, without meaning to. I felt my eyes dip lower until they were fixated on the tell-tale bulge in his shorts. My cheeks flushed hotly. I mentally reprimanded myself for being embarrassed when it was my mate, but had never been exposed to this sort of thing before. I was curious, and I wanted to drink in every inch of him. "Skylar," Gabriel said warningly, voice deeper than usual, and I knew Hed noticed me staring. "Sorry, it's just, how is that going to?" I stuttered almost incoherently. My blush red, and as I realized I hadn't meant to say that last bit out loud, and I stared at the ground to hide my humiliation. I just didn't understand how something so large would be compatible with my small frame. I hadn't wanted Gabriel to know my complete ignorance. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." I continued to stammer like an idiot, finally raising my eyes to meet Gabriel's. To my complete and utter shock, I saw amusement glimmering in his deep eyes, and one side of his mouth was slightly quirked upwards. It wasn't a full, blown grin or anything, but it was the first time I'd seen the slightest indication of amusement from him, and it was mind-blowing. I would act like an idiot every day if I could just see that barest hint of a smile from him again. "You look hot when you're almost smiling," I blurted out, mentally scolding myself immediately afterwards. What the hell was wrong with me? Why was I just talking without thinking first? It was like every ounce of self-awareness had fled my body when Gabriel kissed me. It was completely mortifying. A sudden movement from Gabriel saved me from humiliating myself further as With another frustrated growl, he lowered his head and smashed his lips against mine again. Apparently, this time he liked being referred to as attractive. I opened my mouth to allow him entrance, feeling a rush of bravery that caused me to gently bite on his bottom lip. I knew he wanted to wait for a better moment, but at this moment I didn't give a damn. As soon as I bit down on his lip, I knew Gabriel was having similar thoughts to mine because his kiss intensified and my back was pressed against the tree again. I felt one of his hands reach under the bottom of my shirt and stroke the bearskin on my midriff. I couldn't prevent a small moan of pleasure from escaping. His fingertips were like fire blazing across my stomach. Distantly, I felt some tiny part of me protesting, the logical side of me that wanted to wait for a romantic atmosphere in the middle of the woods. Suddenly, with great force, Gabriel wrenched himself away from me. When my hazy eyes blinked open, he was halfway across the clearing, chest heaving. As much as I want to right now, Skylar, this isn't the time or place. It means a lot to both of us and it isn't meant to happen here. Sliding down the tree, I took a deep breath, quelling my lust. Gabriel's fists were clenched and I could tell he was visibly restraining himself from leaping back at me. Did you hear what I was thinking? I gasped out, seizing on anything to distract me. Gabriel gave a nearly imperceptible nod. Our bond is strengthening, and it helps that in Alpha, in a position like that, I could sense the direction your thoughts were going more than anything. I was somewhat disappointed, and my wolf wanted to resume where we had left off. But the logical side of me was kicking in and I agreed with what Gabriel was saying. Better a bed than on the grassy forest floor. Thinking of such activities made my cheeks heat spark up yet again. Besides, your friend has been trying to contact me for a while now. My eyes widened, and I didn't miss the way he said Will's name, but I brushed it aside. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. What does he want? Before I find out, I want to know that you mean what you said before. I want you to come back to the Black Mountains Pack Village. It'll be going back and forth a lot, especially when we're building the third village. As this pack's future Luna, you'll need to be with me, and I want you there. I felt a rush of pride, especially from my wolf, as I realized what his words entailed, especially the last part he made sure to tack on. This pride was followed by a burst of nervousness, but I attempted to ignore it. I mean it. Gabriel, I'll go wherever you want me to go. He looked relieved, which surprised me. Had he honestly thought it turned him down? Especially after what had just happened. Gabriel's eyes momentarily glazed over and I realized he was talking to Will. I wonder what Will wanted. Did it have something to do with Ava? Had she finally come around? Or was it something else entirely? Seconds later, his gaze ray focused on me. There was a strange expression on his face as he studied me. What is it? I'm not sure if you'll be happy to hear this or not, but it seems my conversation with David did her some good. I tried not to bristle as I heard her name escape his lips. The conversation at my house. Thinking about that night made my stomach turn. No, after. I felt a sense of unease and tried to brush it aside. What did you talk about? To my chagrin, there was a tone of jealousy very evident in my voice. Gabriel's expression softened slightly. I told her that finding one's mate is the best thing that'll ever happen to a wolf. Wasting her affections on someone that will never return what you feel is not worth sacrificing the one that can love her best. Boring into mine, oozed sincerity, and I felt my heart lift. I did not miss the double meaning in his words, as I realized he was indirectly telling me how important I was to him. It took her a while, but she came around. So she and Wilshess accepting him, yes. He wants me to conduct the mating ceremony as soon as possible. While I was glad that what chasing her had been successful after all, Gabriel had been right to assume I would have mixed feelings. I didn't think I could ever like Ava, but I hoped she really was accepting Will for the right reasons, and not just to spite Gabriel. The whole thing seemed rushed, but of course that was how mates usually worked. Most wolves wanted a ceremony in front of the whole pack to recognize them as mates aside from the marking, which was private for obvious reasons, and usually it happened very soon after they met. I nodded obsessively, realizing Gabriel was waiting for my reaction. I guess we'll see how it turns out. We need to head back, he replied, and I nodded, watching him as he retrieved the rest of his clothes and proceeded to put them on. I sped up my pace to catch up to him as he entered the shelter of the trees again, heading back in the direction of the village. It was only a few minutes' walk from here, and I realized how easy it would have been for others to intrude on our moment. It was better that we waited for a better time to become mates officially. Gathering the rest of my bravery from earlier, I tentatively reached out and took Gabriel's hand in mine. It was a forward gesture. I knew Gabriel was not the touchy type. I wanted him to be touchy with me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Which mean I had to condition him. I felt a rush of pleasure as Gabriel glanced at my face, then down at our intertwined hands before he tightened his grip on mine. A smile graced the corners of my mouth, then I felt a bit of extra spring in my step. We'll leave for the Black Mountains village tomorrow at dawn, Gabriel said as we neared the village. I nodded, understanding we didn't have time to waste. Who knew how much longer the holy objects would last? I glanced down at my rosary. It was still warm against my skin, but it grew cooler each day. I had tried not to think about it, but it was definitely cause for concern. It's going to be hard to wait until then for it to happen, he added after a moment, barely murmuring the words. I felt my brow crease with confusion. Wait for what? What's happening? Gabriel glanced down at me, and my breath caught in my throat. His eyes were burning with suppressed desire, and he did nothing to mask the expression. Because of that, I knew what he was going to say before he said it. I shivered involuntarily as he spoke. When we get there, Skylar, I have every intention of picking up where we left off. Chapter 29, Part 1. Gabriel and I continued walking with our hands intertwined even after we entered the main area of the pack village. I was sure that I had a dopey smile on my face, but I couldn't help it. I felt pleasant tingles running up and down my arm caused by the skin contact. My wolf's lust was sated for now, and she hummed contentedly in the back of my consciousness. There were few werewolves about, oddly enough, but the scattered members of my pack stared intently at our clasped hands as we passed. We must have seemed like such an oddity to all of them, a pair of destined inmates yet to complete the marking. Even so long after we first met. I glanced up at Gabriel out of the corner of my eye as we approached my house. He had a relaxed expression, and I couldn't help the burst of warmth I felt as I realized I had caused his good mood. He released my hand as we neared my front door, and I tried to ignore the sense of longing I felt as soon as we lost contact. I have some business to take care of before the ceremony. If we're leaving tomorrow, I need to ready everything. I felt a burst of excitement and nodded in response. I guess I should pack too. When's the ceremony? I see no point in waiting. You'll conduct it right after dark. He looked at me for a moment, dark eyes flicking across my features. I thought I saw his eye hovering just behind his expression, in one smooth move that surprised me. Gabriel leaned forward and placed a light kiss on my lips that lasted less than a second. I felt a rush of heat and my cheeks darkened as I blinked up at him. Immediately, my body craved for more. But Gabriel took a few steps back before I could give in to my lustful impulses. I'll see you later, Skylar. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Voice a bit contorted, and I thought he was having a similar reaction. Okay, was my breathless reply, and I scolded myself for not coming up with anything better than that. I couldn't help it. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Gabriel's touch had a profound effect on me and left my thoughts muddled and laced with desire. Practically in a daze, I slowly made my way inside my house and up to my room. I brushed my fingers across my slightly swollen lips. The recollection of our passionate moments in the woods caused me to blush even more, and I was grateful that my parents weren't home. My thoughts distant, I slowly began to gather my things into the same bag I had used last time. It was interesting how different the situation was to the previous occasion I left home. I was dreading my first encounter with the Black Mountains pack, and there was a strong chance I would come back marked. The next time we see everyone, we will be Luna, my wolf EP14. I swallowed hard, unable to evade the nervousness caused by that concept. It was a lot of responsibility. I was willing to take it on, but that didn't mean it would come easily. Our mate will help us every step of the way, she said confidently. I agreed with her on that one. I was really looking forward to telling my parents about leaving again, but surely they wouldn't be all that surprised. It was customary for the female to join the male's pack and/or live with him, and there weren't any other viable options since Gabriel was alpha. I shoved my bag of toiletries in with my other things as I contemplated. It would be hardly in Maria and Will again. But now we'll had Ava, and hopefully Gabriel and I would return before too long. Almost as soon as I finished packing, I heard a loud rapping on the front door, thawing my brow. I took the stairs down two at a time. Who was coming to visit me in the middle of the day? Swinging the door open, I came face to face with Will. The last time he'd been on my doorstep, Will had been battered and exhausted, but right now he looked like he was on top of the world. Skylar, did you hear? Blue eyes alight with excitement. I couldn't help the small smile that made its way on my face. About you and Ava? Yeah, Gabriel told me. Congratulations. Will paused momentarily, seeming as if he was sniffing the air. His eyes narrowed slightly. His scent is all over you. Skylar. I blushed and looked down. Yeah. I'm not marked yet, but he wanted everyone to know I am his. Will had a strange look on his face but didn't pursue the subject. Can we go for a walk? I wanted to talk and was sure who else to go to. Plus, I remember what happened last time I was alone in your house with you. Remembering Gabriel's blatant display of jealousy, and quickly walked outside to join Will. He was practically bouncing on the balls of his feet. I could honestly never remember him being this overjoyed. He seemed radiant. I wondered if that was how I would looked under different circumstances after meeting Gabriel for the first time. After he accepted me and we planned on joining together in front of the whole pack. Sorry to drag you into this. And just getting used to. Well, you know, Will confessed as we meandered along one of the central pathways in the village. You know, I don't mind. You seem really happy, though you're adjusting just fine. Honestly, I never expected to have to chase her so much. What happened? I couldn't prevent the curious question that emerged. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. I added hastily. Will shrugged. I followed her in the woods. We had a long talk. She was set on the whole mate concept at first, but when we made eye contact, well, a lot of her resistance faded. She said she had been in love with someone else before me, but decided she wanted to move on. I tried to keep my expression neutral. I didn't want Will knowing my dislike for Ava or how she had loved Gabriel. First, I detected a hint of jealousy in Will's voice and didn't want to worsen any problems. We talked all night, and she let me kiss her this morning. It was the most perfect thing to ever happen to me. He eyed me keenly, a spark of mischief in his baby blues. I think you already know about that. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I blushed and didn't reply. Gabriel's scent was heavy enough that it left no room for guessing what had happened. At least your mate finally came around. Too, he added. I was pleased to hear no bitterness in his tone. Meeting Ava must have drained the last vestiges of Will's feelings for me. That was, admittedly, a relief. In going back to the Black Mountains pack village with him. Are you having a ceremony? Too. Not having really considered it. I mean, you're going to be Luna once you're E-marked. The pack will want to recognize you in a ceremony. I caught a glint of admiration in his eyes and it made me slightly uncomfortable. I was used to that sort of attention. I guess you're right. Maybe after all of this vampire crap is over with. I said the sooner, the better. And I elbowed him teasingly. You just want to mark her. I won't deny that. We laughed for a moment more. But then Will's face grew uncharacteristically serious. That was all I wanted to talk to you about. I found out something today and I was sure who to tell. Other doesn't know him, so it made more sense to talk to you. Know who? I responded, puzzled. Will's mouth tight and into a grim line. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I stared at him blankly. Before the name registered, I was sure my eyes had grown as wide as saucers. Your brother? What about him? We had one older brother, Cale, who had graduated high school while we were still in middle school. He was one of the few wolves that had left our pack to mingle in the human world, choosing to attend a faraway university. We hadn't seen him in 5 or 6 years. Will's parents had wanted Cale to stay with our pack, but the boy had refused, and it had caused somewhat of a rift within their family. Will never talked about it, and I had almost forgotten all about it till now. There was enough of an age gap between us that it never really associated with him. I remembered that Maria had a crush on him when we were in elementary school. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Cheers coming back. What? Why now? Will sighed and ran a hand through his tousled, sandy, blonde hair. If I remembered correctly, Cale had even lighter hair than Will and the same bright blue eyes. Well, there's a death. My parents have a hard time thinking him from so far away, but they called his apartment and left a message. Of course he wouldn't have picked up his phone. I could hear bitterness prevalent in Will's voice and I didn't pry. It was his family business. And then they told him about Cain and the vampires, and about me finding my mate. He called back this morning and said he'll be here later tonight. Maybe he is tired of the human world. I mused, trying to take all of this in. Or he just misses you guys. And finding your mate is a big deal. You should be here. Will sighed yet again. I guess. I'm just nervous and I don't know how. I mean, H.S. only talked to my parents maybe twice a year since he left. He doesn't want to associate with us. I'm worried he'll make things awkward. I rubbed his shoulder comfortingly. Or it could go the other way. If H.S. making the effort to return, that should prove something. His lips twisted in a grimace, but he didn't reply for a moment. I wonder if H.S. even the same person. H.S. still mate, lessened everything. But H.S. been around so many humans. I really was sure what to say to that. He can't have changed that much. Not as long as his wolf is still around. I'm just hoping my parents don't go off on him again. I don't want either thinking my family is psycho. I'm sure they won't. This is a time for everyone to work together. Not argue. You're sounding more noble every day. Skylar. A slight smile appeared on Will's face. Either way, I have to talk to the Alpha later. Get permission for my brother to enter our territory. Cale is still technically a part of this pack, but the Alpha may not want him here since H.E. has been gone so long. I frowned slightly. I'll talk to Gabriel about it. Will smirked as he looked past me toward the forest we had just treaded. I expected him to have caught up to us by now, threatening to tear my head off if I continued spending time with you. I began to blush. H.E.'s not that bad. Yes, he is. But I can't blame him. He has the alpha instincts. I bit my lip, not going to admit aloud how I actually kind of liked Gabriel's possessiveness. You're his mate, and H.E. is bound to overprotective of you. I can understand that now. Cheers your knight in shining armor, riding in on his white horse to save the damsel in distress. Will's grin was teasing and I snorted. Gabriel's way too dark and broody for that sort of thing. Either way, cheers the knight. You're his maiden. You've been watching too many fantasy movies. Why do I have to be the weak little female? I can take care of myself. I replied, but my tone was light and I was really offended. I actually liked the idea of Gabriel being a protector, and it was true. He was all mine. He had saved or been there for me several times now, such as when the vampires had kidnapped me, and out of the purge when H.E.D. caught me in his arms. I guess I did look at him as my hero, my knight in shining armor. In a way, Will, waving his hand in a blatant dismissal of my protest, returned the conversation to Ava. I was not fond of the way he praised every aspect of her face and figure and personality, but I kept my lips shut. Despite Eva's flaws, there had to be some good in her for Will to be chosen as her mate. Besides, he was much happier talking about her than about Kale. If my best friend was happy, I had to put my petty problems aside and be happy for him. It's what a Luna would do. The rest of the day passed by quickly, but I ached to be in Gabriel's presence again. I broke the news to my parents that I was returning to the other pack village the following day. As expected, they were not overjoyed, but judging by the look on my father's face, he recognized Gabriel's scent all over me. My dad was stupid, and he was going to prolong the inevitable. I was going to accept Gabriel, and it was my responsibility as his mate to follow him wherever he went, helping him when I could. Thankfully, my parents may not have been pleased, but they weren't heartbroken like last time. We were all one pack now, and they knew it'd be home before too long. I nearly jumped for joy when Gabriel mined, linked with me just as the darkness of night was taking over the sky. Meet me at the south end of the pack village. Is that where the mating ceremony is being held? Confused. Normally it was in the same clearing as pack meetings. No, we have a visitor coming in from the outside world. A former pack member. We're meeting him an hour outside of the village. The ceremony will have to occur later than intended. My confusion lasted only seconds longer before I realized it must be Kale, Will's brother. I was surprised that Gabriel was letting him enter our territory. Kale was still technically a member of the pack, as his connection had never truly been severed. It was frowned upon for werewolves to join the outside world, but not illegal. Brett had not excommunicated Kale just in case the latter decided to return one day. 6 years later, the estranged wolf was finally coming back. Gabriel, to my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Was being overly cautious by insisting on meeting Kale outside of the village, but I was going to complain. I was overjoyed that he was bringing me along for once. I'll be there shortly. About an hour later, Gabriel and I stood side by side in a clearing as we heard Kale fast approaching. Gabriel had asked Jack to accompany us, and he stood silently nearby. Despite not remembering much about Will's brother, I was glad HED made it okay. The Stone of Jacob had repelled the vampires after dark so that he arrived unscathed. I discreetly took a whiff of the air to catch his scent. It was woodsy, faintly resembling Will's, but there was some blandness about the smell that indicated Kale had lived among humans recently. A werewolf, their scent was stronger when we were in our natural element. Gabriel shifted position next to me and our arms nearly brushed. I felt the electricity sparking from our nearness, but I attempted to ignore it. We'd exchanged some conversation, but Gabriel hadn't brought up the passionate encounter from earlier, for which I was grateful. Not that he would have brought it up with Jack traveling with us. Thinking of it just made me want to continue where we'd left off. The concept of doing so made me shiver slightly, and I hoped my mate hadn't noticed. Seconds later, the trampling of paws halted and was quickly followed by the sound of bones snapping and the rustling of clothes. So Kale had run to us in wolf form. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. According to Gabriel, Will had said that Kale flew into the nearest human city before setting off on foot. If he could still shift so easily, he hadn't lost touch with his wolfish side. That was a good sign for someone who'd been with the humans for the past 6 years. Kale emerged shortly, and I blinked in surprise. Archie really changed a lot. He was taller than Will, although not as tall as Gabriel, and lean. Though nicely toned, he had the same blonde hair that I remembered, but it was cut slightly shorter, and his bright blue eyes stood out against his lightly tanned skin. He was very handsome. Maria would freak when she saw him. Archie's not as handsome as our mate, my wolf said a bit snooty why, and I chuckled inwardly. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Nobody can compare to Gabriel. Kale's face registered surprise as he looked at me. Then Jack, his gaze soon sliding to Gabriel. From there, I saw recognition flare in his expression and his jaw clenched. You're the alpha. His voice was colored with shock and distaste. Gabriel's eyes narrowed slightly. I was told you'd been informed of the changes within this pack. Well, yeah, but they didn't tell me who was the alpha. When I was here, your father was in charge of the Black Mountains pack. The packs have been merged as one. Kale, Jack said calmly, clearly trying to diffuse the tension. Brett was no longer fit to be leader. You guys just let them take over like that. I could understand where Kale was coming from, but it was not helping the situation. It was in our best interest. With everything going on, Jack tossed a nervous glance at Gabriel, who was still ominously silent. I honestly don't. Kale, everything will be explained in due time. If we wait around here any longer, you'll miss the ceremony. Jack's words weren't exactly true, as Gabriel had to be there for the ceremony to start. But I knew he was trying to help. Kale's vibrant eyes narrowed as he stared at Gabriel appraisingly. Gabriel had stiffened considerably, not appreciating the disrespect. I was surprised that Kale was acting so gutsy. Gabriel was extremely intimidating to most werewolves. Kale must have been a bit out of touch after living amongst humans instead of under the command of an alpha. Now I see why my parents didn't mention who was alpha now. A growl escaped Gabriel's throat and in an instant, he stood directly in front of Kale, eyes burning with anger. I consider myself very hospitable for allowing you to return. Do not make me regret my decision. I have very little tolerance for disrespect. With a menacing set of his shoulders, there was no doubt of the underlying threat. Kale tried to act calm and collected, but I noticed a flash of fear in his blue eyes. Slowly, he nodded. Let's go. Gabriel snapped brusquely, turning away from Kale and completely ignoring him as he headed off towards the trees. I sighed and made to follow. Gabriel had actually held his temper in check, but I could sense his aggravation that a newcomer was talking to him like that. I couldn't blame Kale. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. As it used to feel the exact same way about the Black Mountains pack. It was a lot for him to take in. Dimly, I realized Kale had fallen into step beside me while Jack caught up to Gabriel. I barely recognized you. Skylar. I glanced at him to see his eyes bright and curious. Well, it's been a while, I replied nonchalantly. It felt strange, conversing with him casually. He hadn't been part of the pack for so long, even if he was Will's brother. It was hard for me to view him as such. I guess so. He was lost in silent thought for a moment before lowering his voice. How is it? With him as alpha? It's just after everything with their pack, I understand. It's different, but it's important that everyone has banded together. Your parents told you about the vampires, right? He nodded, expression solemn. It was so hard to believe. I always thought they were a myth. I laughed humorlessly. Unfortunately not. I heard about Anne. There was visible sadness on his handsome face, and I realized he must be cared about Anne for it to still affect him so many years after HED left. They're relentless and cruel. That's why we needed a strong alpha. Brett cowls and handle it after she, Kale sighed, seeming to accept my answer. We continued towards camp for a few more silent moments. What about you? He spoke suddenly, and sniffed for a moment before his eyes widened. I thought that's what I smelled. The alpha scent is all over you. For the seemingly millionth time. I blushed. Gabriel as my mate. Kale whistled. Little Skylar, with an alpha as a mate, while his eyes perused my neck. You're not marked yet. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Not yet? What else was I supposed to say to that? You'll be Luna. That's crazy. He shook his head, running a large hand through his tousled blonde locks. You have your work cut out with that one. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The last words were spoken in a whisper, I couldn't help but smile slightly. I had indeed worked hard to get where I was with Gabriel now, almost as if he knew what I was thinking. My mate tossed me a penetrating look over his shoulder. Flashes of earlier today assaulted my mind and the red on my cheeks intensified. "A cheers worth it," I muttered to Kale before I really realized what I was saying. I didn't miss the look of disbelief on Kale's face, but I ignored it. My words had escaped unintentionally, but they were true. Gabriel was worth it. Kale's arrival caused quite a stir. I could hear the thinly disguised whispers across the assembled werewolves in the clearing. Kale had arrived half an hour ago, and Gabriel had immediately called everyone together to complete the ceremony. Will and Ava were currently out of sight, as they would enter the clearing at the same time once everything settled down. Kale was standing with his parents, but even from this distance I could sense the awkwardness within his family. It seemed like the three were conversing, but judging by the stony expression on the young man's face, he was not comfortable with it. I mean, what was he going to say to them after so many years away? For my part, I was standing next to my parents near the front of the group. "To my agent extraordinaire, Marilyn Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." To her talking about Kale's sudden arrival, my mother thought it was a good thing, that every family should unite in this time of need. Tuning her out for a bit, my eyes slid across Gabriel and Jack, who were conversing next to the wooden platform, and I vainly tried to find Maria in the crowd. I didn't see her anywhere. This made my eyebrows furrow in puzzlement. Why would she not be here? Will was extremely excited about it. It was an incredibly proud moment for him, and we were his best friends. It was our obligation to support him. So why she has feelings for him? Seeing him with another will hurt her, my wolf said calmly the same instant I came to the conclusion myself. That had to be it. Maria had deep feelings for Will. I was sure how long she'd liked him since it just recently found out, but it would still pain her to watch the ceremony. I was sure Will would completely understand. "To my agent extraordinaire, Marilyn Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." He would want Maria to be happy for him without realizing what it would cost her. Knowing Maria, she would feel extremely guilty for not coming, as she was often too compassionate for her own good. I made a mental note to go visit her after the ceremony and make sure she was doing okay. My eyes continued restlessly skimming the crowd, and I tried not to visibly wince as I briefly made eye contact with Brett and Lynn, his mate and the former Luna. While Lynn's expression was mostly indescribable, I saw vivid dislike in Brett's penetrating stare. I grit my teeth and ignored them. It wasn't entirely my fault that Brett had been removed from his position as alpha. He had helped dig that grave himself. Or at least that's what I kept trying to tell myself. Lastly, and inevitably, my eyes rested on Gabriel. I felt a small jolt as I realized he'd already been staring at me. His dark eyes were intense, and as our eyes met I saw hooded desire that he did not attempt to hide. I was sure my expression mirrored his, and his tantalizing words from early work continuously on repeat inside my brain. He may have been dressed simply, but his shirt was tight enough to accentuate the muscle from underneath. Checking him out was only worsening things, so, with a small unapologetic smile, I managed to tear my eyes away. My wolf was getting restless. Moments later, Will and Ava entered the clearing hand in hand, and I tried to keep my face expressionless as I took in Eva's flowing dress and perfect hair. She looked absolutely beautiful. It was customary to dress up for the mating ritual. I did not miss the way her vivid blues scanned the crowd and then returned to the area next to the wooden platform where Gabriel was standing. I also did not miss her taut and almost longing expression as she discreetly observed her former love. However, just as my hands were curling into fists, Will whispered something in her ear that I did not catch. Eva turned to face him, and her tense expression visibly relaxed. She was the easiest one to read, but I thought I detected sincere affection in her eyes as she gazed at her mate. Will put an arm around her as they trudged up the platform together. In that moment, I thought that maybe she truly did care about Will, and this would help her to get over her wasted affection for Gabriel faster than any other method. As the ceremony started, I felt incredibly selfish for letting my mind wander, but I couldn't help but think about tomorrow. The journey back to Gabriel's village, and the events afterwards, were making my stomach churn in anticipation. In my opinion, tomorrow could not get here fast enough. Marius POV. I felt like a horrible person. Will was one of my best friends, and I was so selfish that I couldn't even make it out to his mating ceremony. It was probably the most important ceremony of his life. Yet here I was, sitting in my living room and stuffing my face with chocolate ice cream. It was my go-to food, especially with everything that happened recently. I knew it was sad and pathetic and that I needed to just get over it. But it was hard. I'd liked him for years now, and feelings like that didn't just go away. It'd been recuperating. Really I had. At least until my father informed me that the ceremony was tonight. After that I pretty much lost it. I was currently watching some runs of one of those corny reality shows Skylar hated. I already knew what she would have done in my position. Skylar was incredibly self-sacrificing and she would have gone. I wanted to be as noble as she was, but I couldn't find the strength. I shoved another spoonful of cold goodness in my mouth, not caring that I'd be getting another brain freeze at any moment. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. My wolf had tried to comfort me, but now she was strangely withdrawn in the back of my mind. Against all logic, she had some sort of tenuous connection with whoever since it'd been of mating age. It didn't make any sense because she should not feel attracted to anyone but my one roommate, but had learned to accept it. Unfortunately, it just made this worse. Okay, stop being such a selfish bitch and go. I told myself for the 10th time after a few more minutes of mindless TV. The all-important ceremony would be starting any minute. I even had an outfit laid out in case I changed my mind, because I sure as hell was going in sweats. As I tried to convince myself, I felt my wolf begin to stir restlessly in the back of my mind. She whined softly, but I pushed her away, sinking back into the plush cushions of the couch again in defeat. My sudden rush of bravery had deserted me again. Who was I kidding? When it came to Will, I was such a coward. I gripped the spoon tightly in my hand as I thought of the woman destined to be Will's mate Ava. The stupid redhead that had reeked of a Kinskyle love life. Why, oh why did she get Will as a mate? The thought of him marking her caused a powerful surge of jealousy to rush through me. Realizing I was about to contort the spoon with my werewolf strength, I quickly dropped it on the table. Thinking of that woman's beautiful face only worsened things. My wolf whined again, this time louder. What's your problem? A bit snippier than intended. My wolf, ever the patient and kind one, ignored my rudeness. I think we should go to the ceremony. I'm itching to get out of this house. Something feels different. We can't. Or I can't. I don't know what he'll do if I see them. My wolf was practically turning impatient circles. We need to go. I'm telling you that I can't do it. Yes, you can. Show them how strong you are. I sighed in frustration at my own weakness. Her impatience was growing. She was practically trying to force herself through my skin now, and I felt her tangible sense of urgency. Okay, if you just need to run, we can do that later. It isn't that. We need to go. This time, it was her tone that was snappish. I was silent for a moment. Rarely did she act like this, and use such a harsh tone with me. Please. She was insistent, and I'd never heard my wolf beg like that before. Despite my misgivings, I really did trust her instinct, and I always had. She was part of me and I respected her needs. Thus, she did not ordinarily behave like this, so it must be been important. Whatever you're egoing on about better be of more importance than me getting my heart crushed. Sure, I was being a bit melodramatic, but for today I was enjoying my pity party. 5 minutes later, I was escaping my house, setting the pace at a fast jog. My wolf was urging me on, and she was growing increasingly frantic. It scarcely had time to run a brush through my scraggly dark hair and change into jeans before she forced me out of the bathroom. I wondered if there was something wrong, but surely my father would have notified me. Either way, I had to force myself not to shift. I rounded the corner and entered the thick trees, following the multitude of scents. Dread was forming in the pit of my stomach because I absolutely did not want to see the ceremony. My wolf's instincts came first. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I gritted my teeth and braced myself for whatever I would see as I rapidly approached the assembled pack. I heard Gabriel's deep baritone as I trod Dee along the well-worn path. This close to the rest of the group, it was much easier to discern individual scents, although the smell of the pack overall was nearly overpowering. Sifting through the various odors of Smestendlead, I suddenly came onto one that made me stop just at the edge to the trees. The group was huddled together in the clearing, and I noticed Will and Ava clasping hands on the platform, but the smell was so distracting I cowed didn't even think about the ceremony. It was a scent that was faintly familiar, somehow, and smelled woodsy. For some reason, I felt my wolf stir with excitement, and I began to take deeper breaths as I tried to inhale more and more of the scent. It was absolutely compelling. I had never caught a scent like it, and it momentarily made me feel safe and comforted. Thoughts of Will were banished from my mind. I was beginning to have an inkling of what was happening, and my eyes began to scan the crowd to instinctively pick out what I was looking for. Dare I hope then I saw him. He wasn't looking right at me, at least not yet, but the way he was glancing around the crowd curiously let me know that he was searching for the same thing I was. My heart lurched as I looked at him. His beautiful, two-souled blonde hair and strong jawline. Despite the teeming mass of werewolves, I knew the scent was coming from him. I had not smelled it in a long time, and he was the only newcomer here. Finally, inexorably, his piercing blue eyes met mine. I gasped as my wolf began howling in my mind, joy radiating from every fiber of her being. I recognized him, though it had been 6 years and he looked older. I remembered Kale from my childhood, but it wouldn't have mattered if I knew him previously or not, because that was not what left me gasping. He is ours. My wolf crowed, yipping with happiness. His face had lit up in absolute wonderment, and even from our distance I could see the silver sheen appearing in his orbs. Slowly, he began to approach me, both of us unaware of the fact that the ceremony had temporarily halted and everyone was realizing what was occurring before their very eyes. My heart was thumping hard in my chest. I probably looked like a complete idiot, but in this moment I didn't care. My eyes were roving every detail of his handsome face and toned body, and my senses were absolutely coming alive as he drew nearer and nearer to me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He gasped finally. The sound of my name coming from his lips made me and my wolf shiver. The lustful impulses were beginning to course through me as he finally came to a stop right in front of me. I understood now why my wolf had some sort of mild connection to Will. Because his brother was my mate. He had left our pack when I was so young that my wolf wouldn't have recognized him as our mate yet. Kale, I replied, completely star-struck. I saw desire in his eyes, plain as day. And right then, he raised a hand and gently cupped my face, sending pleasant tingles sizzling across my skin. In this moment, I no longer cared about Will. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Or even the vampires. I could only stare into those blue eyes, completely lost in their swirling depths. I had found my mate, and I was deliriously happy.